But first, remember the signs. Say them to yourself when you wake in the morning and when you lie down at night, when you wake in the middle of the night. And whatever strange things may happen to you, let nothing turn your mind from following the signs. And secondly, I give you a warning. Here on the mountain I have spoken to you clearly. I will not often do so down in Narnia. Here on the mountain the air is clear and your mind is clear. As you drop down into Narnia the air will thicken. Take great care that it does not confuse your mind. And the signs which you have learned here will not look at all as you expect them to look, which when you will meet them there. That is why it is so important to know them by heart and pay no attention to appearances. Remember the signs and believe the signs. Nothing else matters. And now, daughter of Eve, farewell. The voice had been growing softer towards the end of the speech, and now it faded all away together. Jo looked behind her. To her astonishment, she saw the cliff already more than 100 yards behind her, and the lion himself a speck of bright gold on the edge of it. She had been setting her teeth and clenching her fists for a terrible blast of the lion's breath, but the breath had really been so gentle that she had not even noticed the moment at which she left the earth. And now there was nothing but air for thousands upon thousands of feet below her. She felt frightened only for a second. For one thing, the world beneath her was really far away. It seemed to have nothing to do with her. For another, floating on the breath of the lion was so extremely comfortable. She found she could lie on her back or on her face, and just any way she pleased, just as you can in water if you've learned to float really well. And because she was moving at the same pace as the breath, there was no wind, and the air seemed beautifully warm. It was not in the least like being in an airplane, because there was no noise and no vibration. If Jill had ever been in a balloon, she might have thought it more like that, only better. When she looked back now, she could take in for the real time the real size of the mountain that she was leaving. She wondered why a mountain so huge was not covered with snow and ice, but I suppose all that sort of thing is different in this world, thought Jill. When she looked below her, she was so high that she couldn't make out whether she was floating over land or sea, nor what speed she was going at. By Jove, the signs, said Jill suddenly. I'd better repeat them. She was in panic for a second or two, but she found she could say them all correctly. So that's all right, she said, and lay back on the air as if it was a sofa, with a sigh of contentment. Well, I do declare, said Jill to herself some hours later, I've been asleep. Fancy sleeping on air. I wonder if anyone's done it before. I don't suppose they have. Oh, bother, Scrub probably has. On the same journey a little bit before me. Let's see what it looks like down below. What it looked like was an enormous, very dark blue plain. There were no hills to be seen, but there were very biggish white things moving slowly across it. Those must be clouds, she thought, but far bigger than the ones we saw from the cliff. I suppose they're bigger because they're nearer. Must be getting lower. Bother the sun. The sun, which had been overhead when she began her journey, was now getting into her eyes. This meant that it was getting lower, ahead of her. Scrub was quite right in saying that Jill, I don't know about girls in general, didn't think much about points of the compass. Otherwise she would have known, when the sun began getting in her eyes, that she was travelling pretty nearly due west. Staring at the plain blue below her, blue plain, she presently noticed that there were little dots of brighter, paler colour in it here and there. It's the sea, thought Jill. I do believe those are islands. And so they were. She might have felt rather jealous if she had known that some of them were islands which Scrub had seen from a ship's deck and even landed on, but she didn't know this. Then later on, she began to see that there were little wrinkles on the blue flatness, little wrinkles which must be quite big ocean waves if you were down among them. And now, all along the horizon there was a thick dark line which grew thicker and darker so quickly that you could see it growing. That was the first sign she had of the great speed at which she was travelling, and she knew that the thickening line must be land. Suddenly from her left, for the wind was in the south, a great white cloud came rushing towards her, this time on the same level as herself, and before she knew where she was, she had shot right into the middle of its cold wet fogginess. That took her breath away, but she was in it only for a moment. She came out blinking in the sunlight and found her clothes wet. She had on a blazer and a sweater and shorts and stockings and pretty thick shoes. It had been a muddy sort of day in England. She came out lower than she had gone in, and as soon as she did, she noticed something which I suppose she ought to have been expecting, but which came as a surprise and a shock. It was noises. Up till then she had travelled in total silence. Now, for the first time, she heard the noise of waves and the crying of seagulls. And now, too, she smelled the smell of the sea. There was no mistake about her speed now. She saw two waves meet with a smack and a spout of foam go up between them. But she had hardly seen it before, and it was 100 yards behind her. The land was getting nearer at a great pace. She could see the mountains far inland, and nearer mountains on the left. She could see bays and headlands, woods and fields, stretches of sandy beach. The sound of waves breaking on the shore was growing louder every second and drowning the other sea noises. Suddenly the land opened right ahead of her. She was coming to the mouth of a river. She was very low now, only a few feet above the water. A wave top came against her toe, and a great splash of foam spurted up, drenching her nearly to the waist. Now she was losing speed. Instead of being carried up the river, she was gliding into the river bank on her left. There were so many things to notice that she could hardly take them all in. A smooth green lawn, a ship so brightly colored that it looked like an enormous piece of jewelry, towers and battlements, banners fluttering in the air, a crowd, gay clothes, armor, gold, swords, the sound of music. But this was all jumbled. The first thing that she knew clearly was that she had alighted and was standing under a thicket of trees close by the riverside, and there, only a few feet away from her, was Scrub. The first thing she thought was how grubby and untidy and impressive he looked, and the second thought was, how wet I am.